Welcome to Flip Your Script, the podcast about life's critical turning points and how people find the inspiration and motivation to move forward and rewrite their unique stories. Flip Your Script is produced by Media Minefield, a public relations firm passionate about the power of sharing stories. Specializing in earned and social media, Media Minefield helps clients take control of their unique story and message. The show is hosted by Kristi Piehl, founder and CEO of Media Minefield, who flipped her script from an Emmy-winning journalist to a successful entrepreneur and speaker.
Time magazine declared 2020 the worst year ever. This year will be marked by loss and grief. People lost loved ones and jobs and money and connection and valuable time in school. Everyone, all of us, we lost something. Each of us also gained things because we learned lessons that will impact the rest of our lives. We can't change the circumstances of COVID, but we can take lessons and apply them to make 2021 and beyond better, bigger, and brighter. If we choose to do that, because learning from loss and becoming better are choices. As the clock strikes midnight on New Year's, we can think of ourselves as victims of 2020, or we can consider ourselves survivors of struggle, because we will have more struggle and more difficult days. How are we going to approach them? That's the focus of today's episode. We're going to look back to learn so we can look forward with hope. I want to give you a barrage of positivity and inspiration to launch into the new year. We started this podcast in the spring of 2020 and started recording episodes in April. Our plan was never to turn my guest bedroom into a studio and record episodes with guests virtually. But I wanted to launch so we could share stories to motivate and inspire others by hearing from people who are strong survivors and resilient overcomers. So we did what we had to get this podcast out to you. The mindset and motivation of the guests helped me, and based on the feedback this podcast has received, it's helped thousands of other people. I'm passionate about sharing diverse stories that connect with a wide audience, and these are the stories we need now more than ever. Everyone is capable of more than they think, and sometimes it takes the power of story to find inspiration. At the end of each podcast, I ask the guest, is there a quote or song that motivated you to flip your script? And today, we're going to look back and reflect on each guest's response to this question. There is wisdom in what they say. I'm going to briefly share their story, and then you can hear in their words what motivated them. If you're looking for photos or longer descriptions of each guest, I encourage you to visit flipyourscriptpodcast.com. Let's listen and learn, starting with episode 1. Eric Yetzi, a Miami TV anchor who met his birth mother after she sent him a Facebook message.
You know, I was very lucky in the process of exploration when I was young to have a man named Ron Burton who became a mentor to me. And he would always give me the quote from the poem, Rudyard Kipling's If. I don't know if you're familiar with If or not. And it's a long poem that's really a layout of sort of a loose guideline for how to handle yourself. But, you know, it always begins with, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. And then it goes off into this long layout of ways to handle yourself and situations to build around without compromising your integrity. But for me, especially in this life, in this business, as a family, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, is really an area where I have solidified myself. When things are going crazy, even when it's not your fault, and even when you're being blamed, exhale, breathe, keep your head, you'll find your way.
What great advice. Now let's look to Vicki Swenson. Her sister Terry Lee and Terry's boyfriend were murdered by Terry's ex. Vicki took in Terry's 4 children and became a victim advocate for domestic violence victims.
Well, I'm a big fan of C.S. Lewis, and there is a C.S. Lewis quote that, and I alluded to it earlier, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And life is hard, right? And we have bad things happen, and sometimes to no fault of our own, but we are fully in control of, from that point forward, how we create our own lives. And for me, I didn't want to be a victim for the rest of my life. You know, my sister was murdered. Poor me. I gave up my teaching career. I gave up my life as I knew it. Poor me. It would be easy to have a victim mentality, but that's not a healthy way. And I think for me, that C.S. Lewis quote is beautiful because it gives you freedom in letting go of what happened. It empowers you about how to move forward into your future. And I love that.
Let go of the past and move forward into the future. That's perfect. Another guest whose life changed dramatically in one moment was John O'Leary. He was a child when he barely survived an explosion and now has burns over most of his body. He's an award-winning author and well-known speaker.
So the first quote that I thought about when you started asking the question was a quote from my son, and it's in the book. But I was shaving at age 27, 28 or so. My shirt is off. My little boy Jack is next to me. He's probably 3 or so at the time. He's fake shaving, so the little block is on him, and my shirt is off, which means he's seeing these big old thick red scars like right at his face level. So he looks up at me at one point, and with his index finger, he starts tracking a scar with his finger. And then he says to me with a sweet little innocent little boy voice, "Dad, your tummy is red, it's bumpy, and it is ridgy." Okay, now I need to explain to him that his daddy got burned and it's going to be okay. And I still love you. And your friends will eventually learn to love Mr. O'Leary too. And I'm playing the ego card. That's how we adults go almost immediately. And then here's my favorite line. And then he goes, "And Daddy, I love it. I just love this red, bumpy, ridgy thing you have. I just love it. I just love it." And so I think that's the quote I'll share with you. We could go into a whole lot of other directions. But can you imagine looking at someone else's scar and meaning the words, "I love it"? Can you imagine I'm talking to you right now, listener. Can you imagine looking in the mirror and seeing the wrinkles and the challenges and the bank account, which is not what it was 2 months ago, and the unemployment and the adversity from yesterday or today or maybe tomorrow, and being able to be bold enough to authentically say, "I just love it"?
It's a great thing to think about, isn't it? What do we have in the past that we need to accept, look at, and say, "I love it," because it is a part of who I am and a physical representation of where I've been? Wow. Now let's turn to Corey Heppola. He's a radio host in Minneapolis. He's worked in sports and television news and has lost several jobs and battled depression during his career.
I'm going to go the Bible. We all may have heard of it, but this is one that really stood out to me, and it's become my favorite verse. From Romans chapter 5, verses 3-5 has become my favorite verse, and it helped me to flip my script. It's I'll read it for you. "We also rejoice in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. And hope does not disappoint us, because God has poured out his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom he's given us." And I think that's just such a that's such a beautiful verse, because it has everything in there. Look, life is going to be painful at times. We're going to have to learn painful lessons. We're going to have to go through painful things. We are going to suffer, all of us. But through those lessons, we can persevere, and through that perseverance shows true character, and always we have hope.
He said it. Hope is my word of the year for 2021. There's so much hope in the future, isn't there? Michelle Lawless's episode is one of the most listened to episodes of the year. She isn't famous and she hasn't written a book, but her raw and emotional story of being in a long-term relationship with an alcoholic really resonated with you.
For me, it's this quote, and I think it's something that we have touched on, in the fact that so many of these people that are battling these things in life, nobody sees them. Nobody knows them. And so this quote has always really struck with me. Be kind, For everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about.
Wouldn't the world be a better place if we approached everyone we met with that mindset? Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Let's move to Scott Kramer's story and his quote. He started a nonprofit organization to help kids and families fighting cancer after his daughter Maddie lost her cancer fight.
I think the quote that really sits with me the most today, thinking about this conversation and thinking about Maddie's journey, is a quote from Man's Search for Meaning. And the quote is, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. You know, in the early days of trauma for all of us, we're all asking that question, how? How could this happen? How could this be? How could our life have come to this? How could the world come to this? And if you can make your way to the why, to the purpose that you can carry moving forward, that's where inspiration lies, that's where meaning lies, and it's where the ability to start walking forward is held. And Maddie delivered that why to us the moment that she emerged from her surgery with a little smile on her face and a little crack of some frozen tunes that would follow. We knew our why. And we carried that why from April 21st forward, and we are not stopping anytime soon, and hope that through our efforts that we can help inspire other families and other kids to help find their why.
Scott's resilience to make an impact is one many, many families will benefit from. And now we turn to a different type of flip your script story. Corey Koski spent years playing professional baseball and now is an investor and youth sports coach.
And this is what I do with all the kids I coach. And this has kind of helped me through my stuff. So I line up all the kids and I have them run a sprint, and they have to finish the race. And usually what happens when you line up people, or if anybody runs a race, they see the finish line and they run and they bust their butt for about 95% of the race. And the last 5%, they coast past the finish line. Well, that's not the drill. You were asked to run hard across the finish line. They fully sprint through the whole race. And then we get to the point where they are basically exhausted, and we get them to do one more, and we get them to do one more. And at the end of it, and then we start to encourage and like, you got this, let's go, finish it. Don't quit on yourself, don't quit on the team, don't quit on yourself, don't quit on the team. And at the end of doing it, I pull them all in together. And and the thing that I try to tell them, I said, look, guys, you had a race right here that we did a drill right now where you were tired and every part of your body wanted to quit, and it hurt. Your legs were burning, your lungs were burning, and you wanted to throw up and you wanted to quit. Your body and your mind were telling you to quit, but you were able to dig down and finish the race. When everything around you wanted to quit, you were able to dig down and finish the race and finish the drill. So take this now on to life. You know that you can do this, because in life, there's going to be times when you want to quit. It's going to hurt so bad that you want to go away. But knowing this time right now, it's been 5 minutes since we did this race, it doesn't hurt as bad, does it? And at some point, the pain will go away. It will go away. And so that's kind of the thing that I've tried to really emphasize at every team that I've coached, is doing that drill over and over and over. And what's cool is that I've been able to use that story for multiple kids 5, 6, 7 years after I've coached them, because they've run into a tough time. But that's the same type of thing in which I have that I use, knowing that the pain will go away.
What a great exercise for kids and incredible lesson to learn for life. Chris Maxson, like many of the guests, knows all too well about digging deep when you want to quit. He lost his thriving business in a fire and had to battle back to rebuild.
I think the primary thing is just a verse from Matthew 6:34. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So it's again back to just being focused on today and what we can control and really what's in front of us, because I do believe so much of our worry is caused by negative what if future scenarios. So if we can minimize that as much as possible and focus on really what's in front of us and the decisions that we need to make today based on strong data and not, future what ifs and things we can't control and just focus on what we can control.
Focus on what we can control. Easy to say and hard to do, right? This next guest and episode also resonated with hundreds of you. Angela Kennecke is a well-known South Dakota news anchor and reporter who spent a long time covering the opioid crisis. She never expected she'd lose her own daughter from an overdose.
So Emily was named after Emily Dickinson. And when she was little, we even had a book, a child's book about Emily Dickinson, the poet, because I love her. And I always loved this poem, and it's really helped me cope and helped me get through a lot of times, including this time. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And that's what I think about. It hasn't stopped with Emily's death. Hope has not stopped with her death, and hope lives on.
There it is again, hope. Roshini Rajkumar is also in the media and is now a radio host and executive coach and has had several professional flip your script moments. A lot of her story, though, is about losing her dad when she was just a child.
I will tell you that Ralph Waldo Emerson, who's a transcendentalist, has always really spoken to me. So ever since we started learning about him, maybe in junior high school, whatever it was, his words really speak to me. And they are in essence, I haven't read everything he's written, but they are in essence about the power of the individual. And it's okay sometimes if you're different or you're a nonconformist, there actually could be some fun and some power and some real productivity in being unique. So I would say he is an inspiration as a writer. And the concept that I got from Studio E, which is a Minneapolis-based learning community, they have more than 1,000 alumni now. I went through the Studio E program as my 10-year anniversary present to myself of my business. And the concept of being the only. So we've heard about the unicorn, but really being the only. And sometimes that's tough because when you're in a service business like I am, you have to sort of teach people sometimes, well, this is what I'm selling, but I'm the only one who does it. And I do it, even if there's someone else out there who's similar, I do it better than anyone. So that concept of being the only has really spoken to me. And so with all of the services that I put out there, I try to make sure they're unique, and you can't really find them anywhere else in the marketplace. And that's why they're of value. And that is something that I hope people think about, even in their personal lives. If you're the only, and in some cases you're the only for someone else, there's a lot of power and strength in that.
What a great concept. Figure out your only and go all in. Let's move to Timmy Agundepe. Before he was an entrepreneur, he was a wild child, rebellious and violent teen, and actually ended up becoming a convicted criminal.
Right now in my life, my biggest motivation is a script that I have. I actually have that tattooed on my chest. It's Philippians 4:13, which is I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So that's huge for me, is because I be, sometimes thinking, can I do this? Am I too busy? Am I good enough? And then I think to myself, no matter what, God got me, through help me push through this, situation. And whatever I set my mind to, I will do it because God has my back. Another quote that I have, I actually heard it in jail, funny enough, is every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. And that was huge with me because at the moment I'm thinking, I'm a sinner, whatever the case may be, but every sinner has a future, and every saint that's currently a saint does have a past. So I got that quote tattooed on my right side as well, because that's really meant a lot in jail. Hey, you don't got to be stuck where you're at. You got a future ahead of you. And actually this dude who was sitting 30 years, he told me that. So it's crazy that the dude who did a terrible thing was so influential to me in terms of that quote. I've never heard it before.
Isn't that powerful? Every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. That is wisdom, and Timmy heard it behind bars. You just never know who and where you'll learn from. You just have to be willing to listen. In episode 12, Pam Borton shared how she was forced to flip her script when she was fired as the head coach of a successful college basketball program.
I have a quote, and I'll never forget the book. And I think the book title is "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." And so that really rang a bell to me after I went to a Final Four, is what got me to a Final Four necessarily isn't going to get me there again. So I have to continue to stay relevant and adjust and find different ways of doing things. Just because I got there once doesn't mean I'm going to get there again. That's a book that really rang home to me when you feel like you've reached the pinnacle of your career, that you doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get you there next year. I had this quote outside of my locker room as a coach, and it still rings true to me today, and I've lived by it. But it goes like this: life shrinks or expands according to one's courage.
It's fantastic.
So if you have courage and brave and take chances and take risks, your life can expand. And if you don't have that courage, it can shrink and you will never grow.
Pam's whole episode is filled with pieces of wisdom and tips. It's no surprise she's now finding a lot of success as an executive coach. The next episode is with Matt and Sloane Bowen. They are TikTok famous and about the most inspiring young couple you'll ever hear from. Matt and Sloane were friends when Matt was injured in an accident, leaving him confined to a wheelchair. They fell in love and married.
Yeah, like we've mentioned before, the 10 minutes a day and extreme ownership, those two things have been pivotal in my life. The first one was to help me to get past some of my demons. And the second one was to realize how much control I had over my life. So if I can apply those two principles to any situation in life, I can make it a positive experience.
Yep. And one of my favorite quotes is, "Faith makes things possible, not easy." And I have that quote in our bathroom, and I get to see it every day.
No one has it easy. A good thing to remember. Liz Tumulty in her episode shared her story about overcoming. She came from a home where there wasn't enough money to put food on the table, and through hard work, she was able to rise to the highest levels of network television.
Well, for me, it's a quote, and a quote that one really needs to think about. But it is, whatever you believe in the most, you should question the most. That has helped me through everything, starting from why do kids believe in Santa Claus when I was a kid, to everything, religion, politics, career path, decisions, whatever you've learned or you think you should be doing, you have to think for yourself, why is that the right answer? And again, it goes pretty deep here, but whatever you believe in the most, you should question the most and make sure that you have the answers versus what someone told you was the right answer.
Goes back to that curiosity.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, if people are curious, they just don't pick up on where their curiosity is so much. And I think nurturing that curiosity is so important.
Yes, 100% yes. Get curious. Ask questions. Let's move now to Mike and Gabby Grinberg. They started a business after their daughter was born prematurely, and they decided to create a family-first professional environment.
For me, the quote that, again, not at the time, but sort of after things got going, something that I saw that I read on Instagram, and I loved it so much I printed it and I put it on my board, and it's hanging right in front of me every day when I come to my office. It's, nothing changes until you do. And it's a very simple, it's a very simple quote. I don't know who it's attributed to. It's one of those, catchy social media things, but at the same time, it was very profound to me because we went through so many changes, and those changes are integral to who we are today, to our story, and to why we ended up where we are today.
Let's now learn from a mother-son duo. Tate Maurer battled and survived childhood cancer. He and his mom, Katie, now support cancer causes and are passionate about making a meaningful impact for families fighting cancer.
So for a few years, back in elementary school, my mom would just take me and my sister to school, so we didn't have to take the bus and we could sleep in later. Absolute wins there. But something she'd tell us every day when we get out of the car, just kind of in passing, it was never like a big moment, but she'd always say, do something nice for someone today. And whenever we'd get home that night, she'd ask us what we do, and we'd both either try to scramble to come up with something, or we'd be able to brag about what we did do that day. But that's something I still try to think about each day. Like, it doesn't have to be something life-saving, game-changing, just like a little thing like, oh, you held the door for someone, you helped someone out with their groceries. Just like those little things, they make you feel good and they make them feel good. And it's just little things like that I don't know. It's just something I try to do in my life every day. And another thing I've learned along the way is if you can go above and beyond for someone, then you should do it. I think the quote that best ties to that is always go the extra mile. It's never crowded. It's one thing to do the minimum school-wise, like people try to do it, but when it comes to helping people, like, you always got to go above and beyond. Like, if you can be the person that makes a change for them, like, there's not anything in this world that can replace that. Like, just knowing you made that difference is a feeling really special for you and the person you made a difference in. So I'd say those two quotes are probably the biggest thing for me.
Thank you. Katie?
It's hard to follow that. Early on in his diagnosis, someone sent me a Bible verse, and it has stuck with me ever since then, and it's Romans 12:12. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer. And I mean, I feel like that's a daily verse that I say to myself. And we have definitely that joyful in hope piece is really what got us through all of this. And then there was a song too that I don't know, it was playing at just the right time. And I looked back through my notes, and it was 9 days into his journey when the song really resonated with me. And it's 10,000 Reasons by Matt Redman. And just reminds me to be thankful at all times for all things. And that, you know, when I look back and I trace the hand of God through all of this, like, it's pretty incredible when I see what his plans were. I didn't believe it at the time. It's all in hindsight now, but wow, it was just the things that came out of Tate's cancer have been life-changing. And like Tate said, we are all better people because of it.
Remarkable insight there. The next guest also has great advice, and I encourage you to visit our website, flipyourscriptpodcast.com, or Google her so you can fully appreciate her physical achievements. Jen Bricker-Bauer was born without legs, and because of her mindset, she is now an award-winning gymnast and acclaimed aerialist and author.
Yeah, many, of course. The one that is just sort of, title of my book and everything. It's so Everything is Possible is the title of the book, but it came from Mark 9:23. Everything is possible for the one who believes. And believe, to me, is the key. So, like I said, everyone has the ability to change lives, is made to motivate, made to inspire, but none of that will happen if they themselves don't believe that is possible. And no one can do that for someone else. So it's got a personal thing that we all have to do. So that's just it's got to be that. It's got to be everything is possible for the one who believes. Underline, bold, all of it. Believe is such it's the key.
I can't wait to see what Jen does next. The next woman's quote also comes from the Bible. Joyce Hayden leaned on her faith when her daughter Taylor was shot and killed by a stranger.
I mean, I could go on and on with lots of scripture, but one that is, and it's been my rock for many, many, many years, but it's Psalm 27. And I love that Psalm. But it gets me through, and it's really important. And I'll just read a little bit of it because it's really what helps me. And it says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes, come upon me to eat of my flesh, they stumble and fall. Though a host should encamp around me, my heart shall not fear. The war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I might dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. I love that scripture. And it gives me strength.
Another powerful and inspiring mother we heard from in 2020 is Laura Zobiak. She's the mother of Zach Zobiak, and I can't think about Zach and his impact without hearing his song Clouds.
And we'll go up, 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 but I'll fly a little higher. Go up in the clouds because the view's a little nicer up here, my dear. It won't be long now. It won't be long now.
Zach passed away not long after that song came out. He was just a teenager. His mom, Laura, has written a book about her experience, and now Disney Plus released a feature film based on it.
I really clung to a prayer by St. Teresa of Avila, and it goes like this: let nothing disturb you, let nothing make you afraid. All things are passing away. God never changes. Patience obtains all things. Whoever has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices. And oftentimes the only line that I would say, or the only two lines that I would just repeat in my head over and over again, were let nothing disturb you, let nothing make you afraid. Especially as we were losing Zach, that's what I clung to.
I encourage you to listen to Zach's song Clouds and read Laura's book and watch the movie. Powerful messages that really put everything in perspective. Switching gears now to Sean Mccabe, a workaholic who decided to make a dramatic change and take an extended sabbatical.
Something that changed my life was just a single phrase. And I don't know if it'll make sense to anyone else necessarily, but it was this. It was from a friend in a mastermind group. We're all entrepreneurs. And he told me, you have to earn the right to play the long game. And I'd never heard anyone tell me that. And as a person who tends to think long-term naturally, which I think is not so common, most of the advice we hear is, oh, think about tomorrow, think about the long term, don't just make decisions for today. And I never had trouble with that. I was always long-term. My head is 5 years from now. I'd be talking to my wife about something I want to do and she's freaking out. And I'm like, no, I'm talking about like 5 years from now, not right now. But the problem was I was so up in the clouds with things. I wasn't taking care of my business and covering short-term expenses and making sure things were covered. And so he was saying, look, the long game's great, but if you're not around anymore, none of the investment you're making right now is going to pan out. You have to earn the right to play the long game. And you do that by covering your short-term expenses. So just that was, for me, it was a big deal. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone else, but that really helped me.
Another story of a professional pivot we heard is from Maggie Aldrich. She was a working mom who secretly followed her passion of writing and is now an indie author.
So when I started all of this, thinking about becoming an author, thinking about publishing a book and feeling very insecure about everything, I happened to be reading an article about Russell Wilson. And my husband and I are in fantasy football together, so I honestly think I was researching, what quarterback I wanted to draft or whatever. And I was reading an article about him and how when he was playing in high school, he was kind of a smaller than your typical quarterback. And his dad was yet always encouraging him and saying, you're going to play in the NFL. You're going to be a Super Bowl quarterback someday. And he would say to his dad, why me, Dad? I'm smaller than everyone else out there. Why me? And his dad would say, why not you? And he kind of went with that. He listened to his dad and he thought, exactly, why not me? I try. Just because everyone else is bigger, I can still be a success. And that really struck me because, again, I'm not an English major. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I'm not a famous person. I haven't written in a publication before. But I can write. Anyone with a good grasp of the English language that can tell a story can write. I don't like that we feel like we have to be pigeonholed into these careers or certain things we're supposed to do. And I just kept thinking, like he did, why not me? That's the quote that has inspired me and really helped me along the way.
You know, I love talking about authors and books. And we're going to now move to two authors of books that were on the top of my 2020 list. Arshay Cooper is a member of the first ever all-black high school rowing team. His book, A Most Beautiful Thing, and the documentary with the same name are fantastic.
You know, I think what keeps me going is this quote, I think is by Albert Einstein. It says, the world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but those who watch and do nothing. And that quote has always been a part of my life, right? When you see the need, you meet the need. It's that simple. You know, if young people are hungry, you know, feed them. You know, if a program wants rowing, I'm telling you, I do whatever it takes to make sure they have it, you know? And if the disconnect is so bad between my friends' kids on the west side of Chicago and the cops that work there, I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to figure it out. So if you see the need, meet the need. And that's the way I'm going to live my life.
Arshay's passion for young people, I love it. That's how we're going to change the future. So much hope. Another awesome author is Elaine Weiss. She wrote an incredible book called The Woman's Hour about the battle for women to vote.
Well, you sort of beat me to it, Kristi, with your quotation at the beginning, because it comes from a message that Carrie Chapman Catt, who is one of the main characters in my book, she is the president of the largest mainstream women's suffrage organization in the nation. She's also an international suffrage leader. And after the 19th Amendment, after devoting 30 years of her life to this cause, she finally comes home. She has just established the League of Women Voters, which is again celebrating its centennial of its existence this year. But I'd like to read the beginning of the quote that you ended with, and this is how she begins this letter to the women of America. And I would say it's a letter to all citizens of America. The vote is the emblem of your equality, the guarantee of your liberty. That vote of yours has cost millions of dollars and the lives of thousands of women. Women have suffered agony of soul, which you can never comprehend, that you and your daughters might inherit political freedom. That vote has been costly. Prize it.
Yes, I realize this is a podcast and you can't see me, but I'm standing and cheering. Own your voice. Use your power. Let's move to a story out of Chicago that made international news. Jody Lavoy's husband was killed by a coworker in a tragic workplace violence shooting. His death thrust her into the role of running the company while dealing with intense shock and immense grief.
So, first of all, having three girls, these two songs that really resonated with me when I needed pick-me-ups are Brave by Sarah Bareilles and Roar by Katy Perry. Like, both of those came out during this time. And so I would jam those on the radio when I needed that little bit of oomph. And then the book that really resonates with me is Angela Duckworth's book, The Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, because that's what it took to do what I did in this event, but that's how I was raised as well.
I love that her quote comes from music and how lyrics can hold such incredible messages for us. For our next guest, the story, it's all about the words. Daniel Rubin is another author who's a master storyteller. He went from writing for TV shows in LA to telling the stories of farmers in the Midwest.
I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, and I have it here right in front of me, so I want to make sure I say it exactly right. But Bob Dylan once said, "A man is a success if he gets up in the morning and gets to bed at night and in between does what he wants to do." I love that. Just spend your life, you get one life, do what you need to do. That was my big realization.
Do what you love. Beth Kimmerly can sure attest to that. She's a foodie who turned her love of candy into a really interesting job.
About 10 years ago, I shifted from
sort of the specific world of candy and widened my practice to include the larger world of food and sensory evaluation, and that was all, you know, that was a big shift. And there was a popular song, you might know it. I think the guy's name, I think it might have been a one-hit wonder, but I think the guy's name was B.O.B. and the song was called Airplanes. But it's all about wishing and dreaming, and it's just such a nice uplifting song. It's about this guy, you know, this guy who's gotten into like the party life of being a rapper or singer or whatever he is, and it's just such a beautiful song. And I don't know, all these people have covered it, and I every time I hear that, it makes me feel happy, and it makes me think about dreams and second chances, and, you know, pushing through the mundaneness sometimes of our work and moving it forward and imagining that we're airplanes in the night sky flying.
Crazy that we ended on airplanes in Beth's quote. And now we move to Jeannie White, who spent decades actually on airplanes. She had a front row seat as an industry flipped it script. She started her long career as a flight attendant in the 60s and watched as her coworkers went from eye candy passing out cigarettes, pouring cocktails, to actual safety experts.
One of the songs that's meaningful for my generation in the air was Leaving on a Jet Plane by John Denver. When you hear that, you think of the 60s, the 70s, and just leaving your boyfriend and can't wait to get back.
And now we move to the last episode of the year and the last bit of wisdom. It's from Rosemary Ubuaja. She flipped her script and moved across the world to follow her passion and is now working on something that is incredibly important, especially in the midst of the racial reckoning we've all experienced in 2020. She flipped her script in thinking about advertising as it relates to inclusion.
Feel the fear, but do it anyway. That's the one thing I keep coming back to when I want to try something new and I have all those voices in my head telling me I'm inadequate. I just go back to that. Well, I'm just going to do it anyway. And yeah, that's what's served me well so far.
Yes, feel the fear and do it anyway. A great thing to think about and to challenge ourselves with as we turn the page on 2020. A quote that motivated me after I lost my job as a TV reporter and kept me driving forward during the early years of Media Minefield. And I have to say, I still look to this quote today. It's by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. And I challenge you to take that one step further. Make a path and invite some people to come along with you. If you go ahead, you can make their journey easier. After all, it is not rewarding, and we were not meant to travel alone. We're going to keep traveling on the Flip Your Script podcast. We have fantastic guests and stories coming your way in 2021. My hope is these quotes and each episode of Flip Your Script empowers you to believe you are capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Script, hosted by Kristi Piehl and produced by Media Minefield. If you like our message, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share our episodes with your family and friends. Do you or someone you know have a story about flipping your script? We'd love to share it. Contact us on our website, flipyourscriptpodcast.com. To stay up to date on all things Flip Your Script, make sure to follow host Kristi Piehl on social media. You can also check out the website for pictures, resources mentioned in the show, and other great episodes.